The gavel came down like a gunshot. Last bride. The auctioneer barked, sweat glinting at his temples. Last chance, boys. Lila Grayson didn't flinch. Though the crack of wood against wood jolted through the dry dusk air and set a band of whispers crawling across the gathered men. Her boots ached from the ride that had brought her here, what was left of the ride. After she'd been dragged from a stolen stage and robbed of almost everything but her name, her cheekbones still wore a bruise the color of ripe plums. Dust streaked her skirts, and the cut across her lip tasted of copper. Scarred goods. Someone murmured from the back. Damaged bride, another chuckled. Low and mean. She kept her spine long and her chin high. The wind rolled red sand through the square of Ash Hollow, Wyoming Territory, a place as unforgiving as the sky above it. The sun drooped low, copper and angry. Beyond the boardwalk, a dog barked once and went silent, as if even it felt the weight of the moment. Lila Grayson, the auctioneer, called, as though saying the name might make someone care. Healthy, young, handy enough to read and write. His voice faltered. No ailments known, no takers, her fingers hidden in torn gloves. Found the place on her wrist where an old scar curved a small anchor from a past she didn't let herself. Remember, you'll take her for less, Joe? One man snorted. Wouldn't take her for free, Joe answered. The auctioneer's gaze shifted, uneasy. The crowd was thinning. The night rode close on the breeze. He opened his mouth to end it, call the girl unsold. Send her back to whatever road had chewed her down to bone, when a voice cut across the square. I'll take her. It came low and flat from the shadowed edge of the saloon. Heads turned. The whispering died. He stepped forward, a tall man in a dust-streaked duster. Hat-brim shadowing eyes so pale they seemed lit from behind. Broad-shouldered, raw-boned, silent. The kind of man who didn't come into town unless he had to. Colt Mercer. A ripple went through the onlookers. That's him, someone hissed. Lost his family in the border fires. Mercer, another whispered. I thought he was half dead up there in Blackthorn. If Colt heard them, he gave no sign. He moved with a steady predator's grace, boots creaking against the plank floor as he mounted the platform. His coat fell open just enough to show the worn holster at his hip. He dropped a roll of bills into the auctioneer's waiting hand. No haggling, Colt said. The auctioneer swallowed and took the money. You sure? He tried half-hearted. Colt's pale gaze slid to him. That was answer enough. Lila's eyes found his. There was no pity there, no threat either, just a stillness that made her stomach tighten. She couldn't read him. Couldn't read anything except the smell of dust and the way the crowd stepped back a little as if he carried something contagious. Come on, Colt said quietly, almost to himself. Then, louder to her, we ride. They left Ash Hollow under a bruised sky. The trail cut west, into a country of scrub and broken rock. No words passed between them. Colt's stallion was a great gray beast. She rode behind, perched awkwardly, every muscle sore. One hand gripping the worn leather of his coat to keep her balance. Night came cold and sudden. Coyotes sang far off. She felt each note slice the dark. She measured the man by small things, the way he checked the horizon more than once. The way his shoulders never lost that wary cant, even in silence. At a rise of ground, he slowed. Dismounted, helped her down without meeting her gaze. Blackthorn Ridge, he said, jerking his chin toward a dark shape against the stars. A lone cabin hunched there, smokeless and spare. Inside, the place was cleaner than she'd expected plain. One room, but not the lair of a brute. A hearth cold but swept, a bed stripped bare. A loaf of bread on the table, beside a battered tin kettle. You can take the bed, he said. I'll stay outside, she blinked. Outside? He glanced at her then, the ghost of something like humor flickering and dying. House is yours. For now, she didn't thank him. Couldn't she was too aware of the knife hidden in her boot, the weight of her own breath. She ate a little, just enough to keep from shaking, then sat by the window long after he'd vanished into the dark. The moon climbed silver and strange. She thought about running, and when the thought grew teeth, she moved, quiet, careful, boots soft against the floor. She eased the door open and slipped out into the bitter air. The night smelled of pine pitch and cold ash. She'd no horse, but she had her legs, and the dark and stubbornness, honed sharp by everything behind her. East would lead back toward the rail. East meant maybe survival. She didn't hear the wolves until they were close. Low, rolling growls stitched the shadows together. Two shapes slid from the scrub, eyes green fire, teeth catching starlight. She froze, knife sliding from her boot, hands shaking despite herself. Then a single shot cracked the night. The first wolf yelped and vanished into brush. The second hesitated, then another shot split the dark, and it too vanished. Smoke curled from the barrel of Colt's rifle. He stepped out from the black of the yard, boots silent, eyes pale in the moonlight. "You lost?" he asked. She swallowed. You go that way. You'll feed coyotes before dawn." Her grip on the knife faltered. He didn't move closer, didn't reach for her. "I'm not your jailer," he said evenly. "But out there's worse than here. Decide quick." Something in his voice flat, exhausted, but not cruel slid past her defenses. She backed one step, then another, until the door touched her spine. She retreated inside. He didn't follow. When she dared glance back through the window, he was curling into the hay near the barn, blanket over shoulders, gun across his knees, a solitary guard against teeth and night. For the first time in months, she felt something not quite fear. Dawn came raw and pink. Lila woke stiff but alive. She moved without thinking, swept dust from the floor, coaxed flame into the hearth, found a bucket and carried water from the well. Each task small, ordinary, grounding. Outside, Mercer hammered nails into a fence rail, one-handed and sure. He didn't look up when she passed, but a faint nod marked her presence. The simplest acknowledgement felt heavier than words. By afternoon the wind shifted. Sky hardening gray, scent of snow riding in. He paused his work, scanned the horizon. "Storm's rolling fast," he said. "I can manage a fire," she answered before she thought better of it. A corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. "Good. We'll need heat." The blizzard struck hard and sudden, a white wall swallowing the ridge. Shutters banged like trapped birds. She fought them closed while he hauled water and feed to the barn. Snow stung her face raw, but together wordless. Quick they sealed what they could when the last latch held and the wind howled harmless outside. They ended up side by side at the hearth, shaking snow from hair and coats. Neither spoke. The silence wasn't empty this time. Night deepened. The fire burned low. From somewhere in the shadows he drew a small harmonica and, without looking at her, began to play. The tune was slow, lonely, and wide as the plains. She didn't mean to listen, but the sound wrapped the room. It bled through the cracks in her armor, stirred some ache she'd long ago buried. When the last note faded, she got up, rummaged in her satchel, and set a small tart on the table-dried apple, crumbs barely holding. His eyes flicked to it, then to her. For a breath he looked startled, younger. He nodded once, rough and silent. Something shifted, tiny but undeniable. 2 days later the storm broke. Bright sky returned, sharp and cruel. She found him at dawn, oiling his rifle on the porch. Her hands were raw and chapped from wood and rope. He noticed, stood, disappeared into the shed, came back and laid something on the table without a word. Gloves, soft leather, fine but work-strong, stitched with care. One stitch crooked near the thumberman's imperfect hand-making. Something delicate. She touched them like they might vanish. "Why?" she asked before she could stop herself. He didn't meet her eyes. "Hands shouldn't bleed if they don't have to," No More said. "None needed." She slid them on. Perfect fit. Warmth where there had been cold, not just from the hide but from the gesture itself. Outside, the wind shifted again, carrying scents of pine and far-off smoke. Inside, something fragile but real took root between two people who'd started the night as strangers, the first splinter of trust in a country built on hard men and harder choices. and somewhere beyond the horizon, trouble rode closer. But for now, in the quiet of Blackthorn Ridge, Lila's hands were warm, and Colt Mercer, haunted and half-feral, had offered a piece of himself without saying a single word. Snow still clung to the north slope of Blackthorn Ridge, though the sky had turned pale and sharp, promising spring without quite delivering it. Lila woke to the thin scent of wood smoke and found the gloves on the table again, as if to remind her that last night's quiet gift had been real. Outside, the world was brittle with cold. Frost cracked beneath her boots when she stepped onto the porch. Somewhere beyond the fence, a hawk cried, lonely and thin. She watched Colt stride across the yard, his coat unbuttoned despite the bite of the air. He moved with the same grave caution she'd come to recognize, man half listening to ghosts, half listening to the wind. She'd thought after the wolves and the blizzard that something between them might soften. Yet come morning, he had been the same. Quiet, distant, but never cruel. He taught her where to fetch water without slipping, where the fence sagged, how to stack wood so it wouldn't rot. Each kindness arrived like a coin flipped onto the table, no speech attached. Days stretched and blurred. She learned the land. How the ridge threw a long shadow at dusk. How the creek swelled with ice melt and sang against the rocks. Colt rarely spoke, but when he did, it was plain and useful. Once when she sliced her palm, splitting kindling, he said only keep it clean. Then appeared next morning with those gloves, perfect fit, soft as anything she'd owned. She'd whispered a thank you he pretended not to hear. But the ridge wasn't safe. Even she felt it. The way Colt scanned horizons. The way his horse twitched at night. Rumors drifted on riders who came by for coffee and news. Red Jack gang hunting outlying farms, taking food, taking women. Each time Colt's jaw tightened. He started checking the rifle every evening, slow and methodical. She didn't ask why. One afternoon the wind shifted warm and wild. Colt came back from town, hat low, shoulders stiff. He laid flour and salt on the counter, but his eyes stayed on the door. "What is it?" she asked, before she could stop herself. "Met trouble in Hollow," he said. Red Jack boys sniffing around. Asking who's up on the ridge. Her stomach turned cold. "They know about you?" Maybe not yet." He busied his hands with saddle straps. "We'll be ready if they ride this way." She hated the tremor in her voice. He looked up then, pale eyes catching hers and holding. "You're not alone here, Lila." No one had ever said that to her. Not father, not brothers, not the strangers who'd sold her ticket west. The words landed heavy and strange. That night, she couldn't sleep. Wind moaned through the chinks of the cabin. She sat at the table, fingers brushing the crooked stitch. On the glove, and felt a pull she hadn't felt in years. Not romance. It's not yet. But the idea of safety, somewhere near another human heart. The first sign of trouble came on a warm dusk a week later. Two riders on the far hill, black against the bleeding sunset. They didn't come closer, just lingered until dark, then melted into the timber. Colt watched them from the porch, rifle balanced across his knees. "Scouts," he muttered. Lila's chest tightened. "Will they come?" He didn't answer. Only told her where the trapdoor to the root cellar stuck and how to brace it with a timber once she was inside. "If shooting starts," he said, "you stay put." But she'd been prey before. Hiding had never saved her. 2 nights later, the storm broke. It wasn't wolves this time, but men, 3 of them slipping silent between fence posts while the moon drowned behind cloud. Lila had just banked the fire when she heard the crunch of boots on frost. Her blood went cold. She moved quick, heart a drum in her throat, pulled the timber across the cellar door, and climbed down the ladder. She waited there, breathing shallow, knife in hand. Boards groaned above. A voice she didn't know. "Place looks empty." Another snorted. "Mercer's horse is here." Her pulse hammered, then a crack loud, violent. Gunfire. She jolted. Shouts followed, 2 shots in quick answer. Boots scrambled. Something heavy crashed to the floor. Silence. She waited, teeth sunk into her glove to keep from screaming. Minutes or hours she couldn't tell. Then the trapdoor groaned. She raised the knife. Lila, his voice rough, urgent. She let out a breath that tasted of iron and fear. He swung the hatch wide. Moonlight caught his face, scraped grim alive. "They're gone," he said. "For now." She climbed out, legs shaking. The room smelled of powder. Blood streaked the plank by the door. Colt's sleeve was torn and wet. "You're hurt," she whispered. "It's nothing." He swayed just enough to betray the lie. She tore strips from a flour sack, pressed them to his arm while he hissed but didn't pull away. "Come close." He smelled of smoke and sweat in a cold night. "They'll be back," she said, likely. She swallowed the urge to run. Where would she go? The world out there had teeth sharper than any man's. He must have read the thought because his voice gentled. "We hold here, together." Something in her, brittle for so long, cracked a little wider. Spring came mean and slow. The Red Jack gang didn't return right away, but dread hung over the ridge. Colt built extra barricades, taught her to load and fire the Winchester until her shoulder bruised purple. She learned fast. Better bruised than helpless. Between drills, life slipped in through cracks. He fixed the kitchen hinge that had squealed since the day she arrived. She baked bread when supplies allowed. They didn't thank each other, but the silence between them changed. Less like emptiness, more like room to breathe. One cold night she woke to coughing from the barn. She found him shivering, fever bright in his eyes, blanket kicked off. Without thinking, she knelt and pressed the back of her hand to his brow. Fire! He tried to wave her away, muttering, "Old sickness, don't fuss." She fussed anyway. Boiled water. Brewed bitter herbs she half remembered from her mother's kitchen, wiped sweat from his temples. He didn't protest long. Fever burned down some wall she hadn't breached. In the thin hours he whispered name Selin, Salmon broke into raw, sleeping sobs. She sat through it, a sentinel against nightmares. By dawn the fever eased. When he awoke, embarrassed, she pretended nothing happened. But she noticed the way his eyes softened for a heartbeat before the mask returned. Weeks passed. Lila's body grew strong again, sun to her skin, wind to her lungs. She could ride now without clinging, could hit a tin can at 30 paces with the Winchester. Colt rarely praised but once, after she brought down a coyote stalking the chicken yard. He nodded. Good shot. It felt like a medal. Then word came like a knife. Riders from town brought rumor that Red Jack's gang was regrouping, bigger and meaner. And with them rode someone else, an Eastern man, polished and pale-eyed, asking after a Lila Grayson. She knew before they said it who it must be. Family blood ran cold, but it still ran true. The day he arrived, the sky turned to brass. She was hanging wash when she heard hoofbeats, crisp and controlled. A single rider in a fine coat, boots gleaming. His face too much like her father's not to know older cousin Henry, the one who'd always looked at her like a problem to be solved. Lila. He tipped his hat, voice smooth. Come to fetch you home. She froze, fingers knotting in damp cloth. Home, she said flatly. He swung down, easy confidence in every line. Family's ready to forget. Mistakes happen. You've proven your mettle, I suppose. They're willing to pay Mercer what he spent? Double even. Heat flared up her neck. Behind her, the cabin door creaked. Colt stepped out, rifle easy in his hand, but eyes sharp. Henry's mouth tightened. Sir, Colt said nothing. Just studied the man like measuring a fence before tearing it down. I'm not for sale, Lila said, the words tasting like iron but strong. Henry blinked. It's not about that. It's exactly about that. She took a step forward, voice gathering force. I was bought once. Never again. Color rose in Henry's face. You think this shack and that man are better than your own blood? She felt Colt shift behind her, silent but steady as a wall. She didn't look back. I think choice is better than shame, she said. Henry's jaw worked. Then he turned his horse with a sharp yank. Family tried, he said, cold as the Wyoming wind. Don't come crawling back. She watched him go. Trembling but unbroken. Colt's hand came to rest a moment on her shoulder brief, grounding. She covered it with hers. For a long while neither spoke. Wind combed the grass and carried the moment away. It should have ended there. But the ridge wasn't done testing them. 2 nights later, Red Jack's gang returned in full. Colt woke first to the dogs barking wild. He shoved boots on, rifle up. "Stay low," he shouted as shots cracked the yard. Windows shattered. Sparks flew from lantern glass. Lila grabbed her Winchester, heart hammering but hands steady. She'd trained for this. Shadow moved at the door she fired. A man screamed and fell back. Colt's rifle answered from the porch, deadly and sure. The fight felt endless fire, smoke, splintering wood. Then sudden silence. The gang broke and fled into the timber, leaving 2 bodies and blood in the dirt. Colt leaned against the jam, breathing hard, a fresh graze striping his ribs. She dropped the rifle and caught his arm before he could slide down. "I'm fine," he rasped. "You're bleeding." Sorthe, a ghost of grim humor. She bandaged him by lantern light. "Hands sure now," he let her. When dawn broke, gold across blood and snow, something had changed between them again. Not just survival, partnership. Trust hammered in fire. Weeks later, the ridge felt almost gentle. Chickens scratched, sun warmed the porch, yet whispers of danger lingered. So when Colt suggested a trip to Ash Hollow for supplies, Lila went without fear, but not without vigilance. The town met her differently this time. Not pitying, not cruel, curious, respectful even. After word spread of the stand they'd made against Red Jack, children peeked from behind skirts. A blacksmith tipped his hat. They reached the small spring market just as afternoon light slanted bronze. Lila browsed bolts of calico, uneasy but proud. Colt disappeared toward the smithy. When he returned, he looked strange quiet in a new way. Like a man about to step off a cliff he'd long studied. Then he took her hand. She startled, felt the callous and warmth of his palm. He led her to the center of the square, where folks milled among wagons and stalls. Voices hushed as they realized what was happening. Colt Mercer, ghost of Blackthorn Ridge. Kelatern Recluse was standing with a woman's hand in his. "I don't know what makes a man worthy," he said. Voice rough but clear. "But I know what makes a man promise." A murmur went through the crowd. Lila felt her knees tremble. He reached into his coat, drew out a small iron ring. Dark, rough at the edges, but polished, smooth inside. Hand-forged. "This isn't gold," Colt said. "It's strong, like her. Like what we've built." Someone sniffled in the back row. Someone else whispered, "Well, I'll be." "I spent years running from ghosts," Colt said, eyes fixed on Lila alone. "But I don't want to run anymore. Not from this." He slid the ring onto her finger. It was warm from his palm, heavy with more than metal. The market square seemed to hold its breath. Then Lila lifted her chin, turned so everyone could hear. "I'm not a thing to buy or sell," she said, voice ringing against the wooden storefronts. "I chose to be here. I choose him. I choose this life." For a heartbeat silence, then applause broke scatter at first, then rolling, swelling. The blacksmith's wife wept openly. Children whooped. Even the auctioneer who'd once tried to hawk her, like Stock tipped his hat with. Something like shame. Colt's eyes shone, though no tears fell. He looked at her like a man who'd found land after shipwreck. Lila turned to him and kissed him. Simple, fierce, public. The square roared approval. In that moment, the ghost stepped back. The ridge and its dangers, the family that had cast her out. The gang they'd fatale seemed to fade behind this single hard-won truth. Not survival, but life. Not fear, but love, built with hands scarred and strong. The sun slid low and lit them gold. And for the first time since she'd been dragged west, Lila Grayson felt wholly, defiantly alive.